In the heart of the Sierra Nevada mountains, the mining town of Bodie lurks beneath the grim watch of the surrounding hilltops, cloaked in the veil of low, heavy clouds. It is late afternoon, and the fading sun struggles against the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows over the streets. With its abundant gold mines and more than 60 saloons, Bodie typically radiates an air of untamed wildness. This is the hour it awakens with sinister energy, as the chaos is more than usual as its streets pulse with a malevolent life of their own. The relentless barrage of gunfire and the desperate screams of terrified people echo through the heart of the town. Today is even more chaotic than usual as a menacing group of over 30 Mexican outlaws rides through, causing mayhem and terror wherever they go, turning the town into their hunting ground, preying on the vulnerable, robbing and killing the innocent. Some target women, dragging them as they scream into buildings and dark alleys, assaulting them, while others beat down exhausted miners who have come down from the standard mining caves that lie along the foothills. Several defiant miners do not back down as they pull their weapons, challenging their Mexican invaders. Now and then they'll win a gunfight, only to be gunned down moments later by their enemies' comrades who seem to number them out. Today, the town is teetering on the edge of a complete takeover by this band of ruffians as the gunshots continue to ring out and reverberate off the once crowded streets, causing store and shop owners to permanently close for the day. As the sun dipped behind the rugged hills, casting its golden glow over the weathered town, the shadows began their slow, deliberate stretch. Bandits are now perched high on balconies and rooftops, acting as lookouts and marksmen, waiting eagerly for the glimmer of the town's would-be hero. Calvera, the twisted mastermind who leads this malevolent crew, swaggers through the middle of the street, delighting in the bedlam he and his men have created. Where is this so-called protector I've heard whispers about? You people have been saying this for days now. Calvera bellowed, his voice carrying through the eerie silence, his face contorted into a malicious grin as he strolled confidently alongside his loyal right-hand man, Albert Moreno. His cowering like a spineless cur, Moreno sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Calvera's hand danced playfully on the grip of his revolver. With a practiced hand, he drew his iron and let loose a single shot, the blast reverberating through the east side of town. The sharp report echoed through the dusty streets, a stern reminder of the town's constant edge. Yet, a few of the townsfolk, seasoned by countless such disturbances, calmly made their way from the scene, their eyes wary but their pace unhurried. Strange town, Calvera said, but they claim he will be here today. Let him come. Let him challenge my soldiers. Amidst the chaos, 3 weathered miners emerged from a narrow side street. They too looked at Calvera and his crew as if the violence displayed today was nothing more than routine for this town, and just made their way to the Magnolia Saloon for their usual routine of drinking and gambling. Moments later they were approached by a young woman whose upper lip bore a faint mustache. One of the miners smirks while handing her a small bag as if a small bet was being paid off. Her name is Eleanor Dumont, a part-time miner and formidable gambler known as Madame Mustache, a confidant and friend of Frank Bodie. The group of miners and Madame Mustache strolled casually along the creaking wooden boardwalk of Main Street, catching the attention of Calvera. Well, it seems the hills above have been quite lively today, Calvera sneered, his gaze fixed upon her. The group of miners came to a stop just as Calvera and 2 of his henchmen closed in with bad intentions. Unperturbed by his demeanor, Madame Mustache replied with a sly smile and a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Oh, we've seen better. But today wasn't too shabby. Calvera's eyes locked on the faint mustache adorning her face. Ah, the gambler out of Carson City. Nice to meet your acquaintance. Your upper lip betrays you, Madame Mustache. I wonder if luck will be on my side today. "Let us see what's in that bag." Now Madame Mustache stood tall, a gleam of defiance in her eyes. She refused to yield, refusing to open the bag. Calvira demanded, "If you want to see what's inside, you'll have to do the honors yourself." Calvira's, not in the mood to be in a battle of wills with this woman, pulled his revolver before pressing the cold barrel of his gun against Madame Mustache's forehead. He expected her to crumble and hand it over, or beg for mercy. Yet, her gaze held unwavering resolve, an unyielding spirit that intrigued him. A twisted smile curled upon his lips, anticipation bubbling within him as the suspense hung thick in the air. Mustache's compadres lifted their guns as well, basically saying, "She dies, you're next." Both crews stood in silence for a moment as guns were pointed at each other. As the sun began its final descent on Bodie, a lone figure on horseback appeared from the hillside. A few townsfolk watched with bated breath as their so-called protector's silhouette approached, a sense of foreboding emanating from his every stride. Within seconds, Emilio the lookout, perched high on the local church rooftop, caught sight of the mysterious rider, who continued down a trail along the foothills. Emilio cried out a warning while firing several shots into the air to alert the Calvira gang. "Está viniendo!" Emilio shouted, his voice carrying on with the wind, alarming all who heard. "He is coming." Calvira holstered his weapon, a twisted grin etching itself upon his face after releasing the gun barrel from Mustache's forehead. "We will catch up once I'm finished dealing with this mystery hero." "I too enjoy a good game," he mused, taunting her before shifting his focus to the approaching rider while yelling to his men. "This man, this fool who fancies himself a harbinger of justice, dares to slay 3 of my men and escape unscathed." A few moments went by as the dark rider slowly made his way out of the foothills to the edge of town. With his head down, the brim of his hat covered his face for most of the ride down. They stopped and held still for several seconds, but his head shifted from one side of the street to the other, building to building, rooftop to rooftop. He was counting, tallying up the number of adversaries he might encounter. With that, he pulled out his Winchester rifle, the glint of its barrel catching the sun's fading light. Then, like a dance, the horse known as Nightmare rose on her hind legs before charging down the street, her hooves pounding against the earth like thunder, kicking up clouds of dirt. Calvira's men prepared themselves, laughing at the foolish gringo while lifting their revolvers. With their fingers tightening around the triggers, the tension broke as the first shot was fired and one of Calvira's men fell backward through a window. With that bullet sliced through the air. The rider maneuvered through the chaos as he fired on his targets. His keen eye and swift hand brought armed men to their knees, skillfully dispatching foes from every vantage. He paused briefly in the very core of the town, eliminating several more of Calvira's henchmen in the streets as if they were mere playthings at a carnival gallery. With the tide of adversaries ebbing, Frank slid his Winchester back into its leather cradle, his gaze now sweeping to the shadows behind walls and doorways, to the men on horseback charging into the fray. His hands, as sure as the setting sun, drew his 6 shooters with a resolute grace, and once more relentless gunfire pierced the early evening. With unmistakable precision he began sending men tumbling from their horses, their bodies hitting the dirt with a thud. Calvira stood tall in the middle of the street, his eyes wide with disbelief as he watched the lone gunfighter effortlessly pick off his men, each shot ringing out like a thunderclap in the dusty streets. The dark rider's movements were fluid and precise, fallen bodies littered the thoroughfare. But what began to confuse Calvira was the fact that this fucking gringo was hit several times. What is he wearing that is making these bullets not have an effect? He watched his men take cover in the shadows. Calvira's confidence in his men melted away as he realized the gravity of the situation. He quickly tried to regroup with his remaining men to form some type of defense. Then, as the lone gunfighter disappeared into a side street, Calvira knew that their next meeting would be a reckoning. Calvira turned to his men who were within earshot, Scylla Cabron Las Ballas. Vamonos, he commanded his remaining men. He's out of bullets. Let's go. Heath, this gringo is the devil. You see what he did? Of course I did, so we need to find him and kill him because I can assure you, he is not going to let us live. Calvira looked up at his remaining gunman on the rooftops. You, stay where you are. The men paused, not sure what to do. Vamonos, the night carried a sinister energy that could be felt as the clouds drifted lower, nearly kissing the rooftops, almost as if orchestrated by some unseen power. The moon began to rise, offering a scant light, casting shadows that moved like living things in the dark. It was on one such rooftop that Enrique Gonzalez found himself, heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps as he leaned against the parapet. He had witnessed an event beyond the realm of his understanding. His mind reeled with disbelief. Only moments before the lone gringo gunfighter came down from the hillside. With movements that spoke of deadly precision, the stranger had dispatched almost all of Enrique's comrades, each falling to the ground in a matter of seconds, their lives extinguished as though they were nothing but candles blown out by an unseen wind. And then, as if he were no more substantial than the shadows, the gunfighter had vanished, melting into the darkness of the back streets. Enrique's eyes were drawn across the street where Chelo, who once stood like a sentinel on the rooftop of a local general store, but he too now barely lifting his head over the parapet, scanning the ground below, searching for any sign of the dark rider. For a moment, their eyes met, and Chelo shrugged, a silent communication of shared confusion and fear. But as Enrique began to survey the streets below, that's when he saw her. A young woman staggered along the boardwalk, her disheveled appearance and haunted eyes telling a story of suffering, a victim of a horrific sexual assault hours before. It was a stark reminder of the monstrosities Enrique had played a big part in. The woman stopped in her tracks, sensing his presence, and slowly lifted her head to meet his gaze. In those fleeting seconds, a myriad of emotions passed between them: pain, anger, recognition, and something more unsettling. Her lips curled into a satisfied grin. The chilling smile contrasted with the anguish that had dominated her features, signaling a grim turn of fate. The chilling realization dawned on him that he would become a target of this unstoppable force. As Enrique was about to mouth "I'm sorry" to his young victim, something shifted in the atmosphere, a change setting Enrique's nerves on edge. From the shadows, a large, imposing figure began to rise behind Chelo, its presence so malevolent, so full of dark intention, that Enrique's blood ran cold. His voice tore from his throat in a hoarse yell, a desperate warning for his friend to turn around. But it was too late. Chelo's reaction was sluggish, a fatal delay that sealed his fate. In one swift, horrifying movement, the dark man snatched the rifle from his grasp before cruelly severing Chelo's head from his shoulders, an act of violence so brutal, so devoid of humanity, that Enrique could scarcely comprehend it. The dark rider's eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, now turned toward Enrique, locking onto him with a gaze that seemed to peer into his soul. In those eyes, Enrique saw something that chilled him to the bone, a confirmation of supernatural power, of darkness beyond the understanding of mere mortals. Enrique looked down at his rifle to make sure the chamber was ready, but just as he looked up, his eyes widened as the lifeless body of Chelo had been hurtled over his head, as if propelled by some unseen catapult before crashing onto the roof. Panic surged within him, a fear that urged him to flee and escape the fate that had claimed his friend. With that, he scrambled towards the back of the building, flying over the parapet, flipping himself over the ladder rungs. Once he hit the ground, he sprinted down one of the side streets, hoping to blend into the shadows. As he moved down the dark street for several minutes, he noticed a small half-empty watering trough. Hoping to blend in with the few locals, he made his way in. The bartender looked at him suspiciously, but otherwise let it go. Enrique walked over to the bar and asked for a shot of tequila. His nervous voice was heavy with defeat. The bartender wordlessly poured the amber liquid, understanding the weight of Enrique's request, whose hands shook as he tossed back the tequila in one swift motion. As Enrique set the glass down, the bartender silently refilled it without a word spoken between them. It was as if the bartender understood the magnitude of Enrique's troubles without needing them to be spoken. He knew his time here was short. The smell of gun smoke lingered in the air, a reminder of the danger that loomed. Dondi Esquivel cautiously made his way through the streets, his body close to the walls and shadows along the boardwalk, looking for this monster gringo. He stopped and listened. He heard his comrades shouting in the distance, the panic in their voices as they told each other which way the rider could have gone. There was a gunshot a few buildings over that was followed by his friend screaming in terror. He moved quicker towards them, hoping to sneak up on him. He felt a growing unease as he navigated the shadowy streets of the old western town. With the moon hidden behind thick clouds, the town transformed into a labyrinth of darkness. A moment later, about 30 feet from where he was standing, the dead body of Emilio fell from the sky, landing in the street. Dondi looked up right as the fog dissipated around the church. There he was, the monster, standing on the rooftop of the house of God. Realizing he wanted no part of this, Dondi ducked between buildings. He needed to make it to his horse. He emerged onto a back street he hoped would lead to where his horse was hitched. He walked for several seconds, and just as he was about to make his way between two buildings, a few gunshots rang out. Dondi fell to the ground as both legs had been shot. He cried out in pain for several seconds. As he crawled to the main street, he heard footsteps coming up behind him. He grabbed his gun before it was kicked from his hand. The large, bearded figure in a trench coat towered over him, looking down. "No, hey Dondi Cora, there is nowhere to run." The dark rider reached down as Dondi screamed. On top of the Boone store roof, Fabricio, Fabi, watched in shock as the dark figure hurled Chalo's lifeless body across the street, narrowly missing Enrique before it crashed onto the roof where he was perched. Fabi looked on as their enemy stood focused on Enrique. The powerful figure leaped from the roof with the nonchalance of a man stepping off the boardwalk. Meanwhile, Fabi reloaded, aimed, and fired. As the bullets ricocheted off the ground, the dark man stopped and redirected his attention in Fabi's direction, who managed to duck beneath the parapet. Fabi crawled desperately towards the opposite side of the store's roof. He grabbed the edge of the roof and was about to swing himself over the parapet when he heard a thump. He glanced over to see the large monster looking directly at him. Fabi climbed down so fast he would lose his grip before crashing down to the ground. Too scared to feel pain, he jumped up and rushed down a dark road. Just as he felt freedom a few seconds away, a shot was fired, hitting Fabi's right shoulder, causing him to do a 180 spin. A second shot is fired. This one is a perfect headshot between the eyes as Fabi's feet lift off the ground before his lifeless body dropped to the floor. Gun leading, Javier Luna made his way between buildings, walking quietly towards Main Street. As he moved along the wall, he would whisper the names of his friends, hoping for a reply, but nothing. As he emerged from between two buildings, he caught sight of his comrades' bodies lying throughout the street. Dead. For a few minutes, gunfire had come to a momentary stop, making the sound of his footsteps louder as he stepped on the boardwalk. He looked up along the rooftops as he moved, Mieta, Quine Esticazando Aquine. He thought shit, who's hunting who? He stopped before a general store window and looked inside, unaware of the large silhouette descending from the boardwalk roof. A chill prickled the back of his neck as he realized the presence behind him. Javier quickly swung around, only to be met by a creature that did not look human, but something out of the darkest of nightmares. Like a man possessed by a demon, the large creature snatched Javier's weapon out of his hands before tossing it. He grabbed Javier by the neck and drew him in with a fierce grip before baring its sharp fangs and tearing them into Javier's neck, draining the life and blood from his body. Young Tunkai Esquivel stood vigilant, but his gun was unsteady in his hands after what he had seen several minutes earlier. When they arrived, he knew something was wrong with this town, but nothing like this Leviathan. Calvera and the crew struck fear in Bandera, Texas or Santa Fe, New Mexico. This place was different. They were supposed to ride in here and take over. Plenty of gold to steal. It was supposed to be easy. Make them rich. But that thing. This town, how the hell does a large town with all these saloons just shut down? It was that monster, that creation of the devil, he was certain. This town has its secrets. Secrets had no desire to be acquainted with. As he walked, the night became eerily silent. What the fuck is going on, he thought. Gunfire, gunfire, then silence. More gunfire, then silence once again. The people lured us here. We were tricked. Oy pendejo por aquí, Moreno whispered. Hey stupid, over here. Moreno crouched down by a barrel. He held a finger to his lips. Quiet, he's close. Where are the others? Heifer. They are gone, Tunkai said. Moreno emerged from the shadows and motioned for Tunkai to follow him as both men moved slowly into a narrow space between two buildings. What about the gold? Forget that. We need to leave. They emerged from the alley onto the main street. About two buildings down, they caught the sound of their partners screaming in a panic, followed by gunfire before going silent once again. They gazed at each other in fear. Why are we still here? Where's Calvera? We need to get out of here, Tunkai said. Shut up. Vamonos, the fear is evident in Moreno's voice. They catch sight of his horse as they come around a building, its body language sensing the danger, its eyes wide, nostrils flaring. Both men make their way toward the saloon front where their horses are hitched. At that moment, the blooded body of Enrique crashed out of a saloon window before landing hard in the street. A complete mess. Dead. Panicked, Tunkai swiftly turns and bolts toward the back streets. Tunkai, Adon Va. Moreno pivots, then ducks into the neighboring Sam Leon saloon. Inside the dimly lit Sam Leon saloon, Vidal stood by the dusty window, shielded from the chaos and gunfire raging outside. Calvera's henchmen were fighting to survive, but now they are desperately trying to escape. Vidal looked around, trying to figure out a good time to run for it. A sudden noise made Vidal jump, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm before he realized it was only Moreno. Mieta, me asustaste hasta la muerte, Vidal whispered sharply. Holy shit, you scared me half to death. That fucking thing is right outside. Can't see a damn thing in this fog, Moreno replied. And where are the others? Vidal questioned, his eyes scanning the street for any sign of their companions. The sporadic sound of gunshots opened up again in the streets. That, Moreno pointed towards the chaos outside. Vidal strained his ears as he could hear the shots in the distance. But that was not him, it was the town drunks. They were probably firing into the air. Fuck it. It was now or never. "We must flee this cursed town," Moreno said. Both men slowly stepped out of the saloon's back door. They padded along the gravel as silence followed the gunfire. "This way," Moreno said. The two outlaws hurried down the empty street. As they approached the saloon where their horses were tethered, a sudden gunshot pierced the stillness. Moreno turns and sees Vidal on his knees, the terror in his eyes, blood spewing from his mouth as he dies. About 100 feet away, the dark rider stood in the middle of the street. Moreno sprinted towards his horse, mounting it and spurring into action, riding out of town at a breakneck pace. At the edge of town, he knew he was close to freedom, but moments later the dark figure emerged from his right, keeping pace with him. With a mounting sense of dread, Moreno urged his steed faster, but the shadowy figure closed in, leaping at him with unearthly speed. They collided with a sickening thud, tumbling to the dust-covered ground. Struggling to crawl away, Moreno rolled over and gazed up at the towering figure looming over him. The creature's claw-like nails extended menacingly as Moreno pleaded for mercy. "Please, I'll leave and never return," Moreno begged, his voice quivering with fear, but it was too late. The dark rider showed no mercy, his inhuman eyes glinting with malice as he tore into Moreno's chest, silencing his cries in a gruesome and final act of retribution. The once lawless town now held a darker secret, one that whispered of supernatural forces at play in the Wild West. The weight of his solitude pressed heavily upon him, yet his resolve did not waver. Though the odds were stacked against him, Calvera's heart burned with a relentless determination, and he was prepared to mount one final challenge against his formidable adversary. He was willing to face the gunfighter who had decimated his gang. Was now the sole focus of his ire. Almost every corner he comes around lies 2, 3, or more of his men dead. Some look like their bodies were torn apart, something a wild animal would do. Nothing left to lose now. If he dies at the hands of this gringo gunfighter, so be it. Calvera is a proud man and he will not run away. All Mexican soldiers go out on their feet. Guns blazing, as the Yankee likes to say. Calvera walked quietly. Some noise grabbed his attention in this area. Where is this pinche gringo, he thought. Then, he sees his enemy standing on the rooftop of a building, searching for his next victim, unaware that Calvera has spotted him. Calvera slowly raises his 6-shooters. The dark rider turns just as Calvera opens fire. He fills the gringo with several bullets, who falls backward behind the roof ridge. "I got you, you son of a bitch." Determined to deliver the final blow, he dashed around the building, the taste of vengeance bittersweet on his tongue. Perhaps he'd even deliver a parting insult before his last breath. But as he comes around the corner, to his astonishment, the spot where the gringo should have fallen lay empty, a cruel trick of fate playing out before his eyes. Confusion clouded Calvera's mind as he stood alone in the empty street, his grip tightening on the now useless weapon in his hand. A sudden sense of dread crept over him, a prickling awareness of a presence behind him. With lightning reflexes he spun around, fingers itching for the trigger, only to find himself face to face with the dark figure he had been hunting. In a swift and brutal move, the enigmatic adversary disarmed him with a single, resonant slap. Defeated and outmatched, Calvera could only watch in disbelief as his fate was sealed by the cold and unforgiving hands of the White Devil. A chapter of bloodshed and retribution, written in the dust of the Old West town, with Calvera, the proud warrior, forced to accept his final reckoning at the hands of a foe unbeatable. With a swift and sure hand, the monster seizes Calvera by the collar, hoisting him into the air. The outlaw's eyes widen in fear as he gazes into the piercing gaze of his captor. As the powerful